The Thin Man by Dashiell Hammett, Chapter 12. Macaulay's letter from Clyde Wynant was quite a document. It was very badly typewritten on plain white paper and dated Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, December 26, 1932. It read, Dear Herbert, I am telegraphing Nick Charles, who worked for me, you will remember, some years ago, and who is in New York, to get in touch with you about the terrible death of poor Julia. I want you to do everything in your power to, a line had been X'd and M'd out here, so it was impossible to make anything at all of it, persuade him to find her murderer. I don't care what it costs, pay him. Here are some facts I want you to give him outside of all you know about it yourself. I don't think he should tell these facts to the police, but he will know what is best, and I want him to have a completely free hand, as I have got the utmost confidence in him. Perhaps you had better just show him this letter, after which I must ask you to carefully destroy it. Here are the facts. When I met Julia Thursday night to get that $1,000 from her, she told me she wanted to quit her job. She said she hadn't been at all well for some time, and her doctor had told her she ought to go away and rest, and now that her uncle's estate had been settled, she could afford to and wanted to do it. She had never said anything about bad health before, and I thought she was hiding her real reason and tried to get it out of her, but she stuck to what she had said. I didn't know anything about her uncle dying either. She said it was her Uncle John in Chicago. I suppose that could be looked up if it's important. I couldn't persuade her to change her mind, so she was to leave the last day of the month. She seemed worried or frightened, but she said she wasn't. I was sorry at first that she was going, but then I wasn't, because I had always been able to trust her, and now I wouldn't be if she was lying, as I thought she was. The next fact I want Charles to know is that whatever anybody may think or whatever was true some time ago, Julia and I, our now was X'd out lately, were at the time of her murder, and had been for more than a year, not anything more to each other than employee and employer. This relationship was the result of mutual agreement. Next, I believe some attempt should be made to learn the present whereabouts of the Sidney Kelterman with whom we had trouble some years ago, inasmuch as the experiments I am now engaged in are in line with those he claimed I cheated him out of, and I consider him quite insane enough to have killed Julia in a rage at her refusal to tell him where I could be found. Fourth, and most important, has my divorced wife been in communication with Kelterman? How did she learn I was carrying out the experiments with which he once assisted me? Fifth, the police must be convinced at once that I can tell them nothing about the murder, so that they will take no steps to find me, steps that might lead to a discovery of and a premature exposure of my experiments, which I would consider very dangerous at this time. This can best be avoided by clearing up the mystery of her murder immediately, and that is what I wish to have done. I will communicate with you from time to time, and if in the meanwhile anything should arise to make communication with me imperative, insert the following advertisement in the Times. Abner, yes, Bunny. I will thereupon arrange to get in touch with you. I hope you sufficiently understand the necessity of persuading Charles to act for me, since he is already acquainted with the Kelterman trouble and knows most of the people concerned. Yours truly, Clyde Miller Wynant. I put the letter down on Macaulay's desk and said, It makes a lot of sense. Do you remember what his row with Kelterman was about? Something about changes in the structure of crystals. I can look it up. Macaulay picked up the first sheet of the letter and frowned at it. He says he got $1,000 from her that night. I gave her $5,000 for him. She told me that's what he wanted. $4,000 from Uncle John's estate, I suggested. Looks like it. That's funny. I never thought she'd jip him. I'll have to find out about the other money I turned over to her. Did you know she'd done a jail sentence in Cleveland on a Badger game charge? No, had she really? According to the police, under the name of Rhoda Stewart. Where'd Wynant find her? He shook his head. I've no idea. Know anything about when she came from originally, relatives, things like that? He shook his head again. Who was she engaged to? I asked. I didn't know she was engaged. She was wearing a diamond ring on that finger. That's news to me, he said. He shut his eyes and thought. No, I can't remember ever noticing an engagement ring. He put his forearms on his desk and grinned over them at me. Well, what are the chances of getting you to do what he wants? Slim. I thought so. He moved a hand to touch the letter. You know as much about how he feels as I do. What would make you change your mind? I don't. Would it help any if I could persuade him to meet you? Maybe if I told him that was the only way you'd take it. I'm willing to talk to him, I said, but he'd have to talk a lot straighter than he's writing. Macaulay asked slowly, You mean you think he may have killed her? I don't know anything about that, I said. I don't know as much as the police do, and it's a cinch they haven't got enough on him to make the pinch even if they could find him. Macaulay sighed. Being a goof's lawyer is not much fun. I'll try to make him listen to reason, but I know he won't. I meant to ask, how are his finances these days? Is he as well fixed as he used to be? Almost. The depression's hurt him some along with the rest of us, and the royalties from his smelting process have gone pretty much to hell now that the metals are dead. But he can still count on 50 or 60,000 a year from his glassine and soundproofing patents, with a little more coming in from odds and ends like, he broke off to ask, You're not worrying about his ability to pay whatever you'd ask. No, I was just wondering. I thought of something else. Has he any relatives outside of his ex-wife and children? His sister Alice Wynant that hasn't been on speaking terms with him for, it must be 4 or 5 years now. I suppose that was the Aunt Alice the Jorgensens had not gone to see Christmas afternoon. What did they fall out about? I asked. He gave an interview to one of the papers saying he didn't think the Russian 5-year plan was necessarily doomed to failure. Actually, he didn't make it much stronger than that. I laughed. She's even better than he is. She can't remember things. The time her brother had his appendix out, she and Mimi were in a taxi going to see him the first afternoon, and they passed a hearse coming from the direction of the hospital. Miss Alice turned pale and grabbed Mimi by the arm and said, "Oh dear, if that should be what's-his-name." "Where does she live?" "On Madison Avenue. It's in the phone book." He hesitated. "I don't think—" "I'm not going to bother her." Before I could say anything else, his telephone began to ring. He put the receiver to his ear and said, "Hello? Yes, speaking. Who? Oh, yes." Muscles tightened around his mouth and his eyes opened a little wider. "Where?" He listened some more. "Yes, surely. Can I make it?" He looked at the watch on his left wrist. "Right, see you on the train." He put the telephone down. "That was Lieutenant Guild," he told me. "Winans tried to commit suicide in Allentown, Pennsylvania."